The journey back to Tasharana was quiet. No laughter. No arguments. Only the rhythmic sound of footsteps and wind brushing across dry thorn bushes. Smith walked ahead, guiding the way with the sure steps of one who had left often, but never really returned. Charles stayed in the center, his eyes constantly scanning the sky. And Robert trailed behind, silent, his fingers curled tightly around the black feather he hadn't thrown away. They reached the village gates at dusk. But something was wrong. Children weren't playing by the wells. Smoke no longer rose from the clay ovens. The goats bleated nervously, and even the old griot Baba Kawu was not sitting under the neem tree where he told his nightly stories. Smith froze. Where is everyone? They walked into the center of the village. It was empty, but not abandoned. Signs of hurried departure were everywhere. Half-cooked pots left on fires, clothes swaying eerily on the line, a torn piece of parchment nailed to the communal post. Charles stepped forward and read aloud. To whomever returns, the gold has come back. It speaks from the well. We have gone to the hills. Elder Zawara. Robert felt something twist in his gut. The well. Smith's eyes narrowed. That was where the cursed stone was first found. The one that gave us our map. The one we ignored the warnings about. Suddenly, a distant sound echoed across the quiet streets, a low, rhythmic thumping, like drums being played deep underground. Robert turned pale. That's not drums. He pointed toward the old well at the far end of the village. Its lid was off. Black smoke curled upward. The same smoke that had risen in the quarry. Charles whispered, "Something followed us home." The smoke suddenly formed a shape, an open hand, reaching up from the well, holding the same coin they had burned. And from deep below a voice called out. 3 returned. But one must stay. The sky above Tasharana churned with gray clouds, though no rain fell. Smoke from the old well twisted in silent spirals, curling like tendrils of memory and regret. Smith, Charles, and Robert stood at its edge, staring into a darkness that pulsed. A chill hung in the air. "It's waiting for us," Charles murmured. Smith nodded. "It's not just the curse. It's the choice we've avoided for too long." Robert didn't speak. His eyes were fixed on the smoke hand still holding the cursed coin. He stepped forward, ignoring the others, and placed the black feather into the hand. The smoke absorbed it, and the coin dropped, falling back into the depths. The well moaned. Then something opened. A hidden staircase, spiraling downward into obsidian stone, revealed itself. Each step pulsed gold when touched, bright beneath Smith's feet, flickering under Charles's and burning red beneath Robert's. They descended in silence. The air grew colder. The walls tighter. Ancient carvings appeared along the stone, stories of bonds, of betrayals, of gold used to buy loyalty and destroy it. Faces carved into the stone wept liquid metal that dripped into grooves running toward the center. Finally, they reached it, a circular chamber at the very bottom. In its center stood a stone altar covered in waxy gold, and above it hovered a single object. The original coin, whole, smooth, glowing with a light that was neither holy nor cursed but waiting. Smith stepped forward. "This is where the road ends." Charles placed his hand on Smith's shoulder. "Or where it begins again." They turned to Robert. He looked down, face drawn and heavy. "I know now this thing never wanted gold. It wanted choice. Sacrifice." Smith's voice trembled. "One of us must stay." That's what it said. Robert met their eyes. "Then let me give something I never did before." He stepped to the altar. Charles grabbed his arm. "You don't have to." "I do," Robert said. "For once. I choose to give, not take." He placed both palms on the coin. The chamber exploded in light, blinding, searing, filled with echoes of every memory they had shared. The Iroko tree, the quarry, the oath, the breaking. And then, silence. When Smith and Charles awoke outside the well, it was dawn. Birds chirped. The smoke was gone. The villagers had returned. But Robert was nowhere. And in the center of the square stood a new Iroko sapling, its bark etched with 3 letters. CSR. And beneath it, one gave everything, so the road may never break again. Peace had returned to Tasharana, at least on the surface. The Iroko sapling in the village square grew faster than nature allowed. Within days, it had tripled in height, its roots digging deep into soil long corrupted by greed. The villagers returned one by one, wary but relieved, whispering prayers and leaving bowls of water and kola nuts beneath the tree in reverence. Smith resumed his teaching under the neem tree. Charles helped rebuild the ruined well, now sealed with sacred stone. Neither of them spoke much about Robert, but both visited the sapling daily, placing a hand against the bark, waiting for some sign. Then, on the 7th day, he arrived. A tall man in desert robes with a walking staff shaped like a question mark. His skin was pale like sun-bleached bone. His eyes were completely black, no whites, no pupils. And his voice, when he spoke, sounded like several voices layered into one. He stopped at the edge of the square, staring directly at Smith and Charles. "You burned the coin," he said, "but not the hunger." Charles stood slowly. "Who are you?" "I am called many things," the man said calmly. "The auditor, the witness, the collector. I walk the lands where oaths are made and broken." Smith narrowed his eyes. "We ended the curse." The man chuckled, a dry, cracking sound like old parchment being torn. "No, teacher. You bound it. But such things do not die. They wait. They wear new names." He approached the sapling and knelt, placing a small obsidian pebble at its base. "This tree, it grows fast. Too fast. What it roots in is not only memory. It is sacrifice." Charles stepped forward. "What do you want?" The man straightened. "To warn you, the coin you swallowed in fire returned to soil. It will grow too. It always does." He turned to leave, but stopped. "And when it does, another will have to choose." As he vanished down the hill path, the sapling's bark split slightly, revealing a flicker of gold beneath. And somewhere, deep beneath the earth, something turned over in its sleep. The days turned heavy in Tasharana. Though the sky remained blue and the children laughed again, Charles could not sleep. Each night, he tossed under the weight of dreams of windless deserts, of staircases made from bone, and of Robert, standing in shadow, whispering words that disappeared before they reached his ears. On the 7th night, Charles jolted awake before dawn, drenched in sweat. A sound lingered in the room, not from outside but from within the walls. A whisper. "Charles!" He sat upright. "Robert!" The voice didn't respond, but something pulled him, gently, irresistibly, toward the window. The Iroko sapling stood in the moonlight like a watchman. But its leaves weren't still. They were trembling. Charles stepped outside barefoot, guided by instinct more than reason. As he neared the tree, he saw it, etched clearly now in the bark that had been whole just the day before. A single word. "Under." He pressed his palm to it. Suddenly, his vision split. The village vanished. The tree glowed. The earth fell away. And he stood in a vast underground chamber, pulsing with gold veins and roots that stretched like arteries. At the center, Robert, or what remained of him. He was seated in a throne of bark and memory, his eyes shut, golden vines running through his arms. But his face was peaceful, unburdened. "Robert!" Charles shouted, running forward. Robert's eyes flickered open. "You came," he whispered. His voice echoed like wind through leaves. "What is this place?" Charles asked. "I stayed," Robert replied. "The oath needed a keeper. I became root and road. But you're still walking." Charles reached out. "Come back with me." Robert shook his head. "I am back, just not in the way you hoped." Charles's hands trembled. "Then why did you call me?" Robert looked down. In his palm he held a coin. Not gold. Not cursed. Wooden. etched with a single word, choose. Charles looked up and saw two paths behind Robert. One led to sunlight, the other into shadow. And Robert said, "Soon it will be your turn to stay." Charles stood motionless, the wooden coin heavy in his hand. The two paths behind Robert pulsed faintly, one with warm amber light, the other with shadows that flickered like dying stars. Robert's voice was calm, but there was something ancient in it now. "You still walk the road. But every road ends. Some above, some below." Charles stared at the wooden coin. It had no value, no shine, no weight but meaning. "I thought we burned the gold," he said. Robert nodded. "You did. But the origin, the seed of it, still breathes, buried under roots that remember everything." Charles stepped toward the path of light. "Return," he said softly. "Finish the vow. Live in peace." But the moment he moved, the coin in his hand burned hot, then cold. His chest clenched. A whisper rippled through the chamber. "You still don't know what was traded to forge the first coin." Charles turned slowly toward the path of shadow. He looked at Robert. "What is down there?" Robert's eyes dimmed. "The truth we never asked for." Charles inhaled sharply and stepped toward it. The path narrowed into a tunnel, roots dripping with golden sap, walls carved with ancient symbols. As he descended, the air grew heavier, each breath thick with old sorrow. Finally, he reached a chamber at the root's very end. It was small, circular, lit only by the soft glow of a pool of still water. In its center stood a tree stump, blackened, cracked, and upon it, an object unlike any other. Not a coin, a tooth. Flat, carved, hollow. On its surface, etched in perfect Hausa script. "From the mouth of the first betrayer." Charles recoiled. Then he heard the voice, not Robert's, not Smith's. A woman's voice, strong and unyielding. The coin was never for riches. It was to bind the traitor to the memory of what he destroyed. Charles looked into the pool and saw his own reflection slowly changing, his eyes darkening, his face aging. And the voice said, "Every oath reborn requires a new keeper." Smith sat under the neem tree with the children of Tasha Rana gathered around him, chalk in one hand and a story ready on his tongue. But today something felt wrong. He paused before speaking, his eyes drifting across the eager faces. "What's wrong, Malam Smith?" asked little Zaliha, the girl who never missed a lesson. Smith forced a smile. "Nothing, just thinking." He looked down at the lesson slate. He'd written the names of 3 travelers from a story he often told. The same story woven from truth and myth. Charles, Robert, Smith. But today, when he looked at the board, the second name was missing. The chalk hadn't smudged. The surface hadn't cracked. It was simply gone. He rewrote it slowly, Robert. Then blinked, and it faded again, as if the slate refused to remember. His stomach turned cold. "Children," he asked carefully, "who do you remember went on the journey with Charles and me?" The kids looked at each other, puzzled. "Was it Musa?" one asked. No, another said. "It was just the 2 of you, wasn't it?" Smith stood up, slate falling to the ground. He turned toward the Iroko sapling in the square. The bark that had once read CSR now simply read C.S. No sign of the R. Smith ran to the base of the tree and pressed his palm to it. No, not again. From deep within the bark, a faint whisper crawled into his ears. "The keeper is being forgotten. The bond weakens again." He staggered back. "Charles," he muttered. "Where are you?" Suddenly, a harsh wind swept through the square, scattering dust and leaves. In the middle of the village, a faint shimmer appeared in the air, a ripple, like the surface of disturbed water. And in its center, a glimpse of Charles descending deeper, far below. Smith clenched his fists. If he stays too long, he won't come back. Not as himself. Just then Baba Kawu approached, frowning. "Malam Smith, remind me, who is Charles again?" "Your cousin." and Smith's heart nearly stopped. Charles stood frozen before the blackened stump and the hollow tooth resting on it. The chamber was silent except for his breath, uneven, echoing in a space that felt older than memory. Then a ripple stirred the still pool. From its depths a figure rose, not with water but with absence, as if reality bent around it. It had no face, only a veil of shadows shaped like a crown. Its body was thin and long, clad in robes of rust and dust. It moved without sound. The air turned cold. "I know why you've come," the figure said, its voice neither male nor female, but thunder wrapped in silk. "You carry the coin's echo, but you do not understand its origin." Charles backed away, but the figure raised a single bony hand. "Be still, and I will show you." Suddenly, the chamber filled with lightless images, not memories but warnings. He saw a time before gold, before trade, when oaths were made in blood and kept with bone, when trust was sacred, not measured in weight but in word. Then came one who broke the bond, the first betrayer. She was a healer, beloved and trusted, who turned sacred herbs into poison for the sake of power. When the tribe exiled her, she bit out her own tooth, carved a symbol of self over sacrifice, and offered it as currency, the first false bond. That tooth became legend. It passed from tribe to tribe, growing into gold, shaping the first coins, the first betrayals, the first empires built not on truth, but on debt. Charles stepped back. "You turned betrayal into wealth." The figure's veil pulsed. "No, they did. I only showed them the door." Charles stared at the tooth again, now glowing slightly in his hand. "Is that what we inherited?" The betrayer nodded. "Every coin is a seed of broken trust. Yours is simply flowering again." "But Robert," he gave himself to break the chain. The betrayer stepped closer. "And now you are next. If you do not stay, the memory of your bond will fade. Not just from names, but from time." Charles looked at his reflection in the pool. His hair was graying. His skin had begun to crack faintly like old bark. "Your choice," the betrayer said. "Stay and hold the memory, or leave and let it be rewritten." Charles closed his hand over the tooth. And the pool reflected Robert's face again, but this time his eyes were gold and he whispered, "If you leave me here, I become legend, not brother." The Iroko sapling stood tall under the cloudless sky, but to Smith it felt hollow. People passed it every day, yet no one seemed to remember why it stood there, who planted it, or what had been lost beneath it. Except Smith. He knelt before the trunk, pressing his palm to the bark, whispering the forgotten name. "Charles." "Nothing." Then he took the cowrie shell, the one that had once pulsed when Robert was remembered, and placed it at the root. "I won't let both of you be taken." The shell cracked, and the earth opened beneath him. Without hesitation, Smith dove in, falling, not through soil but through story. The descent was dizzying. Images swirled past him. Visions of the three boys under the first Iroko, the glint of gold in the quarry, Robert's broken oath, and Charles vanishing into the tree's shadow. Time bent sideways, then inverted. Then stillness. Smith landed in what looked like a forest, but the trees were upside down. Their roots reached toward the sky, their branches dug into black earth. The air smelled of burning memory. He wandered, heart pounding. "Charles!" he shouted. His voice echoed, swallowed by silence. Then he saw it, a pool of gold surrounded by carvings of ancient oaths. And floating in the center, unmoving, was Charles. His hair had gone white. His fingers were bark. A hollow tooth glowed faintly in his palm. Smith ran forward. "You're not staying here. Not like this." Charles's eyes fluttered open. "You shouldn't have come." Smith gripped his friend's shoulders. "Someone had to, or we'll all be forgotten." Charles looked down. "If I leave, no one will hold the story. The oath will fade." Smith shook his head. "Then we carry it together." From his bag, he drew out a second cowrie shell. one he'd kept hidden, untouched by the curse. He pressed it to Charles's palm. A surge of light erupted from the pool. The golden water boiled, then flattened into glass. The upside-down forest cracked apart. Roots turned into flame. As the world collapsed around them, Smith shouted, "Jump!" And the two leapt. Into nothing. Only the sapling in the real world remained, glowing like a torch. And beneath it, two new names carved themselves into the bark. CS. Rememberers. Tasha Rana rejoiced when Charles and Smith returned. To the villagers, they were simply two men who had been gone a little too long. But to the Iroko, to the air, to the very soil, their return pulsed like thunder beneath silence. The sapling had grown a full meter taller. Its bark was smooth and warm. But Charles noticed something strange on his first walk through the market. A glint. Not of memory, but metal. On the neck of a trader from the east hung a pendant the size of a coin. Flat, circular, marked not with Hausa script but with a smiling face. The trader wore desert robes and gold-lined shoes. He spoke fast, laughed louder, and every customer left his stall with a wide grin, and one of those smiling coins. Smith's skin prickled. He approached a young woman counting her wares. "Sister, where did you get that coin?" She looked up, blinking as if waking from a dream. "Oh, he gave it to me. The new merchant. Said it's for luck. It feels good in my hand. Warm." Charles gently took it and turned it over. There were no markings. No currency. Only the smile. A perfectly carved grin that looked more like a wound than joy. That night, Smith couldn't sleep. He sat beside the Iroko, coin in hand. It throbbed faintly, like it had a pulse. Suddenly, the air shifted, and out from the tree's shadow stepped the stranger they'd seen before, the one who had called himself the auditor. He stood calmly, hands folded, eyes black as before. "I warned you," he said softly. "Coins do not die. They change." Charles rose. "We burned the curse. Robert paid the price. We kept the oath. And so the curse learned," the stranger replied. "It no longer tempts with gold. Now it tempts with joy, with belonging, with illusion. And the people will want it." Smith's jaw tightened. "What does it want now?" The auditor tilted his head. "What it always wanted. Memory. Power. A name spoken enough times to become truth." He walked into the center of the square and tapped the smiling coin still in Smith's hand. "This one is no longer asking to be chosen." He leaned in closer. "It's choosing for you." In the morning, the trader was gone, but every child in the village had a smiling coin tied to their ankle. And not one of them remembered Robert. Dawn broke over Tasha Rana with unnatural warmth. The skies glowed orange, the air sweet with Iroko bloom. Yet Smith awoke with a knot in his gut. The smiling coin still sat on his table, unmoved, and somehow watching. He rushed outside. Children were skipping through the village, humming the same eerie tune. At their ankles, the smiling coins swung like charms, catching the sunlight with unsettling precision. Charles met him at the well, his expression grim. I tried speaking to Zaliha. Asked if she remembered the story of the three brothers. And she said there were only two. Then she laughed, like it was a joke I didn't get. Smith clenched his fists. It's spreading faster than the cursed gold ever did. The children wear it now. That means they'll grow with the lie. They moved through the market together, trying to speak with elders, friends, even the village chief. But every time they mentioned the coin's danger, they were met with confused looks, or worse, defensive anger. You think blessing is a curse? One woman snapped. That coin cured my child's fever. It gave my harvest a second chance, said another. Even Baba Kawu, once the guardian of stories, waved them off. The smiling coin brings peace. Who are you to stir old ghosts? Charles leaned in. You don't remember Robert? The old man paused. His face twitched, like a name almost surfaced. Then he smiled. Robert? Ah, that's just a story. That night, Smith placed one of the coins in a bowl of fire. It did not burn. It sang, a high-pitched, soft tone, like a lullaby from something that did not sleep. The flames flickered blue. Then suddenly the coin vanished. The bowl was empty. Smith and Charles stared at each other in dread. "We're not fighting a curse anymore," Charles whispered. "We're fighting belief." Moments later, Zaliha arrived at their doorstep. Her voice was monotone. Her eyes were distant. "The coin wants you to stop," she said. "It doesn't like being forgotten." Then she handed them something wrapped in cloth. Inside was the broken wooden coin Charles had carried. And carved into it now was the smiling face. Charles and Smith didn't sleep. They sat in silence, the smiling-faced wooden coin between them, as if even the act of blinking might let it spread further. By morning they had made a choice. "We must go to the first shrine," Charles said. "If the coin rewrites memory, we need to reach what cannot be rewritten." Smith nodded. The place where names were carved before there was gold. The first shrine lay on the outskirts of ancient Kano, carved into the base of Dala Hill. A sacred site, older than kings, older than the city walls. It was where the earliest Hausa griots had once gathered to bind names to stone with fire and word. If anything could survive the curse of forgetting, it was there. They traveled swiftly by nightfall, bypassing traders and roads now humming with smiling coins. Everywhere they passed, they saw new markets springing up, not with cattle or millet, but with tokens, coins for comfort, for luck, for identity. The smile was becoming law. When they reached the foot of Dala Hill, they found something chilling. The shrine's entrance, once carved with hundreds of ancestral names, was blank. The sandstone had been smoothed over as if wiped clean by time, or something worse. Charles touched the wall. "I came here as a boy," he said. "My great-uncle's name was here. It used to glow with ochre." Smith stepped forward and pulled a hidden blade from beneath his robe. With its tip, he scratched one word into the blank wall. "Robert." Nothing happened. But then a single letter peeled itself away, sliding to the ground like a shed leaf. It was an R. Charles picked it up. "It's trying to make him unpronounceable." Smith looked around. If this place can be rewritten, then nowhere is safe. Suddenly the air pulsed. From inside the shrine a low hum began. The walls shimmered faintly. And then, a figure stepped out. Not the auditor. Not the betrayer. A girl, maybe 10 years old, barefoot, her eyes glowing with soft fire. Her voice was layered with hundreds of whispers. "You shouldn't have come here," she said. Charles lowered his voice. "Who are you?" "I am memory. Or I was. Until the coin offered something better." Smith's mouth went dry. What could be better than memory? The girl smiled, the same smile as the coin. "Control. Cliffhanger." She raised a hand, and the sandstone wall behind her cracked open, revealing hundreds of names scratched out, buried beneath white dust. At the very top, only one name remained untouched. R. And it was fading fast.